Well, good morning, everybody. We're glad that you are with us for this month's Zoom Business Boost on time management. Work smarter, not harder. I think this is something that we can all benefit from. And so we are excited to have Dorinda Byers with us. And she's the business development consultant at the Auditor of State with Keith Faber. And so here's a little bio just to give you a background of who Dorinda is. She reached out to us as we were connecting and said she had some opportunities to share, and we said, let's do it. So with more than 20 years of experience, Dorinda possesses a proven track record of increasing organizational effectiveness, shaping culture, strengthening teams, and positioning clients for sustainability and growth. Her diverse employment background includes workforce, outreach, sales, and economic development in community colleges, manufacturing, and universities. Dorinda holds a master's degree from Muskingum University and a bachelor's from Ohio State, and is a business development consultant at the Ohio Auditor of State, as I said before, where she helps improve efficiency, effectiveness, and economy of government programs and organizations. She loves to cook, read, walk, travel, and spend time with her husband and spoil her nieces and nephews. We have quite a bio, Dorinda.
Yes.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Wendy. I'd like to thank you both for having me, and I'd like to point out the good timing of this webinar with the time change coming up next weekend. So I don't know, Wendy and Chris, how the two of you planned that, but you couldn't have planned any better for the time change and for this to be occurring at this time. So thank you so much for having me. People hear auditor and they sometimes think, oh no, that you're like the IRS. So I like to start with a joke and I like to end with a joke. So we're going to start with a joke today. And since our theme is time, our joke will be time related. Why did the man throw a clock out the window?
Why?
He wanted to see time fly. Okay. So we are not going to talk about how to make time fly, but we are going to talk today about how to use your time better. So thank you again, Wendy and Chris, for the opportunity. Our agenda for today, we're going to have a little overview of what our office does. We are finding that a lot of people don't know what we do at the Auditor of State's office. So we're going to have a couple of slides to let you know what we are doing on behalf of you all as taxpayers. We're going to talk a little about your core values and career vision and how that fits into how you use time. We're going to get into some time management techniques and strategies, how we build effective habits, and then have a few resources that you will be able to take back and use at your workplace. And then also any time that you might have left over for questions. And we can also take questions as we kind of go along the way. Just some introductions. You all already got to know me, but Halloween is also coming up this weekend. So if you'd like, put your name, role, and organization in the chat, and also your favorite Halloween candy. My favorite Halloween candy is probably those marshmallow peeps. So you can imagine I'm high energy and then I eat a whole bunch of those Halloween peeps and yikes, it just gets really crazy. So put your name, role, organization, and favorite Halloween candy in the chat for us if you can. A little overview of our office at the Auditor of State. We are one of 5 independently elected offices. The others are Treasurer of State, Attorney General, Governor, and Secretary of State. Our role is to be efficient, effective, and transparent in government, and to help place checks and balances on governments on behalf of taxpayers. Our auditor, Auditor Faber, as Chris mentioned, he served time in the legislature previously as a past Senate president. That can be very helpful to us when we are working on things legislatively, like we just did for some new fraud training that we have rolled out with some local governments, and also with anyone who's in a public office or a public service type of role in the state of Ohio. Our office, by the numbers quickly, we have over 5,900 local and state entities that we audit. And what that means is we're going in and looking at were your tax dollars spent lawfully and appropriately. So we're going in and reviewing records of spending to make sure that all laws were followed. That next number, 3.8 billion, many of you may have had a COVID unemployment claim filed in your name, as I did back during the pandemic. We were one of the leaders in the country at identifying this COVID unemployment pandemic fraud very early on. And we identified about 3.8, unfortunately, billion dollars worth of that fraud that occurred. Many other states, however, were up in the double digits with numbers closer to $15 billion, for example. Unfortunately, many of those dollars went overseas, but we were able to recapture some dollars from places like a Franklin County Job and Family Services caseworker who was inappropriately awarding unemployment compensation to family and friends. The next number, 124,000. Medicaid is the largest line item in the state of Ohio budget. So we do a lot of audits. We actually have a special division that does audits of the Medicaid program to check into that funding. Auditor Faber, a couple of years ago, back in 2023, said they want to look at Ohio's Medicaid program and see if individuals are dual enrolled in Ohio's Medicaid program and that of another state. And what we found were 124,000 Ohioans who were enrolled in Ohio's Medicaid program and that of another state. So they were being paid for twice at a cost of more than $200 million to Ohio taxpayers. So those are the kinds of things that we are looking for as far as your tax dollars and spending, and then putting fixes in place to rectify inappropriate spending when we find it. That next number, a little happier number, $6.4 billion. We run something called a Uniform Accounting Network software program out of our office. And what we do with that program is we help local governments be able to track their spending to meet the requirements and meet the laws that they have to follow with those tax dollars. So we have some specialized modules in there for things like cemeteries, for example, in that software program. And about 6.4 billion of your tax dollars flow through that program. Our next number, 142, since the auditor came into office in 2019, we have actually convicted 142 individuals, believe it or not, of misspending your tax dollars. We have 800 employees at our office, and we also receive about 1,700, a little over 1,700 calls per year in what's called our local government services unit. We have a unit that tries to help local government officials, especially those who might be part-time, like school board members or township trustees. If they have questions about spending and need some help, we can provide help out of that department. And then finally, our last number, a little over 24 million, we have something called findings for recovery. And if your tax dollars are spent inappropriately, we can actually do what's called a finding for recovery and claw back someone's public pension, for example, to get those dollars back for taxpayers. Couple of other things about our office. I mentioned the financial audits. That's the bulk of our work. We crank out over 4,200 of those financial audits per year on every type of governmental entity around the state. It might be a cemetery. It might be a visitor and convention bureau, believe it or not. Anyone who receives tax dollars, a school, a library, etc., we are auditing them. I would like to encourage you to look at our website in the cybersecurity area. That next category of ours, data and IT audits. We're seeing a lot more cyber types of fraud occurring with local governments, and we have some free resources on our website that you can take a look at that might be helpful to your business. It might be something as simple as someone is emailing into a local government and pretending to be a vendor that they've done business with and asking them to change their bank information. That's a really common one called a vendor redirect that we are seeing these days. Unfortunately, we've had some entities get taken there for six-figure type amounts. So please check out the resources that we have available on our website for cybersecurity. And I encourage you to look at what you are doing in your business with cyber protection. Special audits. We receive numerous reports of fraud in government every year. And we have a department called our Special Audits Department that investigates those. Every single complaint that actually occurs to us, we investigate. If you suspect fraud, you can report that through our website, through an email, through a toll-free hotline that we have, and also by sending in a letter. So if you do suspect that there might be abuse going on in your local government or state government, please let us know that and we will investigate that. We also do something called performance audits. And primarily in this department, about half of our work is helping fiscally distressed school districts who might be experiencing financial challenges to try to help them kind of right the ship, if you will, and reduce spending. But we also look at other programs such as the Department of Aging, where we just did a performance audit, looking at how efficiently and effectively that program is running on behalf of Ohioans. So we're almost more like a consulting group in that department. And then finally, we offer helping and training, like I mentioned, to those local governments. One other point, if you want to know how your local governmental entity is doing in their audit results, you can look that up at no cost on our website. With that, we're going to transition into time management and talk a little about some of our core values and career vision. As you just heard, we stay pretty busy in our office, and every single one of the audits that we do has time standards associated with it. So time management is extremely important to us because we need to complete our audit on time. Our work has really serious implications for some of our local governments. Obviously, if there's misspending going on, we need to make sure that that gets addressed as quickly as possible and is no longer occurring. But also, our audit results can affect things like a bond rating for a local government. So it's really important that we complete our work on time. As you think about core values and vision, you'll notice at the bottom of our slide 3 words: efficient, effective, and transparent. Those are some of our core values at the auditor's office, and our 800 employees can probably tell you those values. So your core values matter. Why do they matter? Because they're helping you think about a filter for the way that you spend your time and the types of activities that you're working on. And if you don't have those core values, you can kind of be saying yes to things that really aren't helping you achieve your goals or your vision. And you also want to think about doing the things that matter the most and get the most results for you and how you spend your time intentionally. So our core values matter. I want to challenge us to really think about what our core values are so we make better leadership and time decisions. So we want to spend a little time reflecting, and we're not necessarily going to do that now, but I have a core values worksheet that you can take back to your workplace and actually try that. And I really encourage you to spend some time thinking about that. A couple of other things when we think about our values and time, we can ask for help from our colleagues and get some feedback from them. And we could also be thinking about this on our own and be thinking about how we spend our time. So one of the authors that I cite later in my presentation, Laura Vanderkam, actually encourages us to log our time. And she has a no-cost time tracking template where she encourages you to log every single hour, 168 of them for a week, and actually see how you're spending your time and where your time is going. And is your time in line with your core values? Also, looking at how you spend your time may help you identify what some of your core values are. This is the core values exercise that I mentioned. We can do this in about 10 minutes when we get back to our workplace. We just take a look at some of the list of values that there are, and we start choosing those that we like. And then we kind of come down to 5, and we kind of write how we want to act and live out those values in our life. So again, this link will be in the slides, Wendy and Chris, if we would be able to get it out to attendees later. But I encourage you to take some time and figure out what your core values are. I also encourage you to think about your core values with your family. So this is something that doesn't just affect you professionally, but this is also a great tool that you can use personally to think about with your family and your loved ones. What are some of our core values and how do we want to spend our time? And what are the things we want to work on as a family? I think we often get so busy, both personally and professionally, that we forget why we're doing what we're doing. And sometimes it's just good, especially with the new year coming up, to do a reset and really think about how we're spending our time. And are we spending it on the core values that bring us the most joy, fulfillment, and success? Some questions to consider once we have our core values. And notice here, the last slide, I just talked about how we need to think about our personal life, our professional life, but also our family and some of our relationships. So when we're thinking about our values, we want to be thinking holistically about our whole life. A couple of other things we want to think about: how do we feel when the values are present in our life? How do we feel when they're not present? And how do these values maybe impact my choices? You'll see as we go along, I'm a big fan of asking ourselves questions to really consider. Are our values in alignment with the things that we want to be doing? And are we spending our time in accordance with our values? Once we have our values, we can use those to write a career vision statement. And again, we can also write one of these for our family. So not only a vision statement for our career, but a vision statement for our family. What are we good at as a family? What are some of our values that we need to feel fulfilled? What problems do we want to solve? And what would our family look like in the next 10 to 20 years? So we can do the same things that it says on this slide with our career, also for our family, and think about our personal lives and our professional lives. But this career vision statement really helps us think about, again, how do we spend our time? And notice that the example statement actually talks about how this person wants to focus their time on developing people and building systems for long-term impact. So again, even if you have a career vision statement, let's take a step back And let's really stop and think about whether that career vision statement is still serving us today, and perhaps go back and rewrite that based on some of our values. Once we have that, we can also think about the clear framework and how we're spending our time. So, is an activity on our list connected to our North Star? Is it linked to a goal? Is it essential? Is it advantageous? Is it reality based, or is it something that I might be, over perfecting? So we really need to think about, once we have those values, are we acting accordingly? And are we looking at whether the things we're doing are linked to our goals? Are they something that we might be spending too much time on because we're trying to perfect it? Once we have our career vision and value statement, now we're ready to think about time management. What are some things we can do to think about how we spend our time better? I love this matrix. Has anyone seen any of these matrices before? So these are matrices that kind of help us think about how important is something on the left-hand side, how urgent is it on top. The Eisenhower is probably one of my favorite, and the ones that you will see in the middle and on over toward the right are kind of just variations on the Eisenhower. But what we want to think about when we think about this time matrix is how important is something and how urgent is something. And I think what most of us find is we're spending more time maybe on things like that first quadrant that are urgent and important, but we're not spending as much time on some of the long-term planning, for example, kinds of things that are in that second quadrant that are not urgent but are still important. So I'm going to guess that for most of us, I know for me, this is the challenge. How do we try to spend more time in that quadrant two on the things that are important but not urgent? And how are we spending less time on things like that quadrant three that somehow become urgent but aren't important? And we want to spend even less time in that fourth quadrant. So we want to be trying as much as possible to avoid emergencies. But I think this quadrant really helps us think about our time in terms of what's important to us and what's urgent, and where do we maybe need to be spending more time when we think about what is important to us. 1-3-5 rule. I love this one because most of us have to-do lists way longer than we can possibly get done in a day. Why do I like this? Because we're going to think about what is one main task that would be my big win of the day. If I can just get this done, that will be a huge win for me. And we're going to focus on that. So we're going to take that to-do list and we're really going to try to prioritize what is on that list. We're then going to come up with 3 medium tasks for that day. What are 3 medium tasks that I might need to complete? For example, in my case, I need to complete my Auditor of State travel form. Ugh, but I don't necessarily like to do it, but it's something that I need to complete. So that might fall into that medium. Then we come over to that small task, and those might be things that we've just been putting off. Oh, I need to call and make that doctor's appointment. Oh, I need to, find out if Johnny's going to pick up Susie after school tomorrow. Some of those small things. So if we think in terms of that 1-3-5, it can really help us prioritize what we want to get done for today. What's going to be our big win? What's going to be 3 of those medium tasks we need to get done? And then what's going to be our small task? And then we want to start with that really big win of the day to make sure that it doesn't get squeezed out. Because again, I think for most of us, what happens is we fill our day with some of the other kinds of things, the medium and the small tasks, and we don't necessarily get back to that main task that would be our big win for the day. And productivity questions. I mentioned earlier how I love questions. I love these questions. One of them especially that I love is question 3. What could I start today that will avoid an emergency tomorrow? I am not a person who enjoys emergencies. We looked at our matrix back there. We had our urgent kinds of things at the top. We had our important things at the side. I would much rather be working on those important things than having to get to those urgent things. So I'm a person that loves to think about what could I start today that will help me avoid that emergency tomorrow. The other thing I like to think about is, again, we just talked about that 1-3-5. What is one critical task that has to get done today for me no matter what? So making sure that we get to that big win or that big critical piece that has to get done. And then where can I batch common activities together today? So I love to do that. Sometimes if I'm going to be on the road, for example, could I have people give me phone calls while I'm, on the road somewhere and people can be calling me and I could kind of batch some of those together. And then I also like, where could I lose a large portion of time today? So these questions just really challenge us to start thinking about how we spend our time and breaking that cycle of we're just kind of in the routine and we have no control over our time. These questions really challenge us to think about time a little differently and how do we spend time in the most effective possible manner for us. Some other aspects of productivity. Number one, these apply very well to delegating. Number one, there is task decomposition. So I have a bad habit sometimes if I'm delegating something to just assume that the person is going to know how to do it. My husband, on the other hand, is much better at kind of breaking things out into those smaller pieces. So if we're going to delegate something to somebody, have we broken it down into something small enough that they will be able to understand the different steps and ask us questions? Number two, that task completion. If we are working with other people, even if we're working with ourselves, how are we going to motivate ourselves to get these tasks completed? So, what does that motivation look like? And how do we manage our attention? And we're going to talk about a great tool to do a little later in regards to that. And then number three, who is going to be our best person if we're going to outsource a task? Who is the best person to outsource that to? So again, if we're thinking about productivity and delegating to someone, how do we break it down? How do we motivate them to complete it? And then who is actually the best person to give a particular task to if we are doing delegation? A delegation framework to kind of help us a little further with that. I love this one because, again, it's challenging us to ask some questions. So, again, I'll use myself as an example. I've had a bad habit of just thinking, well, I can just kind of give that to anybody. We all know that there are some things we could probably be delegating right now that we aren't. And I just think, well, I can, give it to anybody. But what we really need to be doing is setting ourselves and the person we're delegating the task to up for success. We can do that by asking questions. Who's closest to the action? Have we made this decision before? Could somebody else offer a better perspective? And where is momentum stalled? So, again, even if we're thinking about chores at home, we could be asking ourselves these questions when we think about how we're going to delegate those chores to people. Kanban boards can be another really great tool. If you are a person who is a visual person and really likes to see progress of activities, these are used often in manufacturing. And what you see is on the left, we have our backlog of tasks where we're thinking about kind of everything that we have to get done. So we kind of have that master list there. We have to do what we've got to kind of work on today. Then we have ongoing projects in that next section, and then we have things that we get done. So these can also be a great way to reward ourselves that we can see that progress as we move things from backlog over to done. So this can be a great visual system, and you can actually, and I've seen people do it, put tasks on little Post-it notes and move them around. There's also some really great tools in Microsoft Teams that allow you to set up a Kanban board or a whiteboard for yourself and your team where you can move things around. So again, if you're working on a team, this is a great way also to get a visual representation of what everybody's kind of got in progress at any given time. Pomodoro. I mentioned earlier a technique that kind of helps us focus our attention and gives us a little bit of a break as we go. You'll notice here, one of the reasons that it's called Pomodoro is because of that tomato and that timer. So the gentleman who actually came up with this technique, he has a book on this, and he actually used a literal tomato kitchen timer for this task. But essentially, Pomodoro is really simple. What we're going to do with a Pomodoro is we're going to take 25 minutes. No distractions are allowed. We're actually going to time ourselves and we're going to come up with a task that we're going to work on for 25 minutes straight. Once we get done with that, we can take a 5-minute break and then we're going to get back to work. I love this task for something that I am stalled on. So, for example, I have to, let's say, do a report and I just haven't had any momentum and I haven't made any progress on it. Pomodoro is a great way to get started because you say, okay, I'm just going to work on this for 25 minutes and I'm going to see what kind of progress I can make on this. And often what you'll find is you make so much progress that you're willing to come back to it again and, get started and kind of knock it out and get done. The other thing I like about Pomodoro is when we think about those 25-minute blocks, for something that we have to do on a regular basis, the Pomodoro is very helpful because we can start thinking about how many Pomodoros it may take us to do a particular task. So the report that I mentioned, does it take me 3 Pomodoros to do that, about 75 minutes? Or how long does it take me to do that? So we can actually start using the Pomodoro to break down tasks that we do on a regular basis and think about the number of blocks of time that we need to do it. I have found this to be a wonderful method for me because I can work on even something that I totally dread for 25 minutes as long as I stay focused on it, because then that break is coming. And it kind of really helps with those things, maybe again, that you procrastinated on, where you just need to get a little momentum going. It's also great for kids because kids know there's an end in sight. I have to work on cleaning up my room for 25 minutes. And after that, there's an end in sight. I'm going to get a break. A couple of benefits of Pomodoro. I like it because I think it does create that sense of accomplishment. I also like it for what it says about improving time awareness. We mentioned earlier that report, and if I start using Pomodoro, I can start tracking how long something is taking me to get done. I also like it because I think that there's a break and you're able to concentrate. So you can ignore your phone, all those social media things, and just really do a deep dive for 25 minutes. That would have been an activity if we were actually in person. The flow time technique is good for people like my husband who say, well, I can't get enough done in 25 minutes, so the Pomodoro isn't good for me. And what you do in flow time is you're going to record the time that you start to work on something. So let's say we start to work on something at 9 a.m. You just kind of keep going and working on the task and work until you feel tired or distracted, note the end time, and then take a break. So as it says here, if you're working on something, let's say for 25 to 50 minutes, you can take an 8-minute break, 50 to 90 minutes, a 10-minute break, or a 15-minute break over 90 minutes. So for someone like my husband who might need more time to kind of get into a flow or a rhythm, this is still a great technique because, again, it causes you to be mindful of your time. You're going to start on something, notice when you get tired or distracted, when you're kind of at a point of diminishing returns, and then you're going to take a little bit of break. So it actually allows you to get into that flow. And again, you can decide what that flow looks like for you with this particular technique. It's similar to Pomodoro in that it will still allow us to track how much time we're spending on something. So we can be mindful that if we start on that report at 9 a.m. and we're kind of in the flow until 9:45, maybe we only need to do 2 of those flow time sessions in order to get that report done, but it does encourage us to be more mindful of time. Rapid planning method. What I like about this is we're aiming for a particular outcome. So we're thinking about what are the results we want to get, what is the purpose behind our goal, and what is the massive action plan that we might need. I have found this to be helpful for something like a grant application. So a grant application, for example, can be kind of overwhelming. There's a lot of pieces and parts to it. So we can start to think about, okay, we want to get the grant completed. That's the outcome we're aiming for. We want to do the grant because we've got a program that it can support. And then what are some of the key steps that we're going to need to reach the result? We're going to need to get letters of support from our partners. We're going to need to think about who our partners are. We're going to need to prepare a budget, et cetera. So again, it really helps us start breaking down some really big, overwhelming tasks like writing a grant down into much more smaller and manageable pieces that we can do ourselves. So we see a sense of progress. Possibly we can also delegate. It also helps us capture everything and organize and prioritize. So I really like this, again, for those big tasks where it just feels like there's so much to do. How do I break this down? I think this may work well also for something like an event. You think about a checklist for an event that you're going to try to pull off, and what are some of the steps maybe that need to happen there. Building some effective habits. We talked a little earlier about thinking about what our big win of the day is. There's actually a book by Brian Tracy called Eat That Frog. And we see here some of the statistics that he talks about. It can really take us a while to regain full focus after we have an interruption. That's where the Pomodoro can be helpful. And we're losing a lot of time to those interruptions and recovery time. But what Brian's real premise of his book is, he wants us to start with that really big task that we have and eat that frog every day first. So, whatever our most difficult task is that we really think we have to make some progress on and get done that day, he wants us to think about making some progress on that and doing that before all these other things get in the way. So we're going to start with our really big task and our really big challenge for the day, and we're going to tackle that. He also has some other key premises like how we're going to plan every day in advance. We're going to try to only single handle every task. We're going to identify roadblocks and we're going to apply that 80-20 rule to everything. So we're going to be thinking about that 80-20 rule. And what is that 80-20 rule? Well, essentially 80% of our results come from 20% of our activities. So what are the 20% of our activities that are driving 80% of our results? And how do we focus more on those things? 5 Choices to Extraordinary Productivity. This is part of the Covey family, and I really enjoyed this book. Some key premises that you see down there at the bottom. Number one, scheduling those big rocks. So we're really going to take control of our time by trying to schedule time in for our priorities. So back to our matrix, we're going to be looking at those things that are important, but not necessarily urgent, and how we schedule time in for those. We're going to be looking at ourselves and how we fuel our fire. So many of us these days are burned out. How are we going to make time in there to fuel our own personal fire? How are we going to look at what roles we have in our life? And we'll talk about that here in a subsequent slide, and prioritize those roles and how our goals fit into those roles in our life. Another methodology that I love from the 5 Choices to Extraordinary Productivity is that pause, clarify, and decide. So we're going to pause and just step back for a moment from reacting to things. We're not going to let that urgency just drive our decisions. We're going to clarify. We're going to take a look at everything that's kind of coming at us and ask if it aligns with our priorities. And then we're going to decide whether those tasks are worth our time and energy. So this is really great when you just have a lot of different things coming at you, because you're going to do that pausing, taking a quick step back. You're going to clarify, and then you're going to decide how you want to handle something. So rather than just reacting, we're going to take that second to pause and determine how we want to react. Again, I mentioned the 5 Choices to Extraordinary Productivity and the roles. One of the things that this book talked about that really resonated with me was all of us have multiple types of roles. I've talked a little earlier about personal and professional. We're mothers, we're friends, we're daughters, we're sisters, those sorts of things. So thinking about the various roles that we play in our life and trying to take our time matrix and prioritize the different roles that we play. What are maybe, let's just say, the top 3 roles that matter most to us now for clarity and balance? And then identifying some that are really going to be extraordinary for us. And back to our statement, we're going to actually come up with a role statement that really helps us think about what success looks like in the various roles that we have. So we're going to ask some questions and think about what are those roles that are most important to me, and how do I want to best spend my time to be extraordinary in some of those roles. Some steps of getting things done. This is a great book for those of you who work in teams, and I think we probably all do, but some great methodologies that he talks about. And a couple that really relate well with me is capturing. So making sure that we have everything captured, everything that's on our mind, and we kind of have a place to capture that. Oh, that's a great idea. I really should do something with that. What is our system to capture those things that are on our mind? And what does that look like for us? And if we don't have one, let's figure out how we're going to get one. Let's clarify. We talked a little earlier about clarify with extraordinary productivity. How do we decide whether each item is actionable? What's the next action? And if it's not actionable, then can we put it on hold? Is it just a reference? Is it just trash? So we're really going to clarify what are the various things coming at us again, and how actionable are they? Then we're going to organize and create some systems that work for us, folders, lists, calendars, etc. We're going to regularly reflect on our system. I spent some time this weekend reflecting on my system and trying to kind of regain control a little. It had gotten a little out of control because the last few weeks were pretty busy. So we're going to spend that time reflecting. That reflection is really important to us, to think about what's working, what's not working, and to also reevaluate how we're spending our time. And then finally, we're going to use that trusted system to execute on the actions that we want to take. Micro starts. Can something be done in 2 minutes? If so, let's get it done right away. And if not, then let's begin with something. Let's take a little stab at some sort of action, and then we can come back to it later. We want to build momentum and avoid procrastination. So your brain can keep those unfinished tasks kind of in the background and not be always sitting there thinking how overwhelmed you are. So we can either get something done in 2 minutes or take a little step towards getting it done in a micro start. Mel Robbins' rule, a couple of things that I like. She has a great technique she likes for avoiding procrastination, and it's her 5-4-3-2-1 rule. So thinking about getting up in bed, our alarm goes off, we don't necessarily want to get up. She says we say 5-4-3-2-1 and we count down and we're going to go. We're going to get something done, whether we really want to or not. So our response there on the left is often that we want to procrastinate. We try to come up with something else we can do. But Mel says that 5-4-3-2-1 helps us create some momentum. We start to feel confident and motivated and moving ahead with something. So this might be a great, again, rule for us in thinking about kids. 5-4-3-2-1, we're going to go and we're going to start to clean our rooms. The 80-20 time audit, I touched earlier on this, really thinking about the 20% of our activities that drive 80% of results and really doing that time audit. So this could allow us to track our time and take a look at how we're spending our time and then where are we getting the results. So we're actually categorizing our tasks once we track our time, looking for what's a high, medium, or low impact. And we're trying to really determine where our results come from. And then we're trying to figure out how do we get rid of some of those low impact tasks and how do we try to find any time that we might save and push it over towards our activities, that 20% that's driving 80% of our results. So we're trying to really shift time that is right now not as well utilized as it could be over to things that get us more results. And we're also maybe just trying to free up some time to even think about what that might be, because some of us might be so overwhelmed we don't even know. But it really starts with taking a step back to take a fresh look at how we're spending our time by actually tracking that time and then categorizing that time into what's high, medium, or low impact for us. Off the clock. Laura Vanderkam is a great author on time. And if you're interested in learning more about time management, I encourage you to check out her book as well. A couple of principles I really like. Again, number 3, she's looking at those 3 key daily tasks that truly matter. So thinking about that work, but then also personally, what really matters to you. You know, for me, I really like exercise. It's really something that helps me kind of get a good focus. So I've got to make sure that I schedule that time in. And for me, it's got to be first thing in the morning. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So thinking about those 3 key daily tasks that I want to achieve personally and professionally, and how do I schedule those in? She's also a big fan of prioritizing experiences. So how do we prioritize those experiences versus just living on autopilot? Where can we maybe go out and just enjoy a hike in the woods, for example? And then also trying to look at how do we slow down? So maybe being able to arrive early sometimes and savor the moment. Meeting management time. So a couple of things I like here that I've actually tried are using some odd start times. So starting a meeting, for example, at 10:15 a.m., 10 a.m. instead of 10 a.m., perhaps gives people that extra few minutes to get there and also can reduce the amount of time that we're meeting potentially from an hour to down to, let's just say, 30 minutes or 45 minutes. Also taking a look at how do we look at our meeting agendas? And I love that POST framework. What's our purpose? What's our outcome? What's our structure? And what's the timing? So really trying to make sure that we have an agenda or a purpose for our meetings. You know, so many times people ask us for meetings. I just had this happen yesterday, wanting a meeting. Well, what's the agenda for the meeting? So, asking those questions so we can make better use of our time and trying to understand, and then offering that same information to others. If we want to meet with somebody, what is it that we want to accomplish when we want to meet with email tips? A couple things here that I really like. Number one, I love to create templates. So I have some different templates that I have kind of ready to go. Like if I'm going to be emailing somebody for the first time about my workshops, for example, I've got a template ready to go. So I can just copy and paste that. Where might there be common templates that you could use in your emails to respond? You know, for Wendy and Chris, for example, maybe a new member, and they probably got a new member template that they can send out to people versus having to regenerate that every single time. So looking for those opportunities where we can use templates. And then also, I love to batch up emails. So it talks about their scheduling checks, but really taking a look at our email during definite scheduled times of the day versus just constantly popping in on email. So being conscientious and aware of when we're going to schedule our emails. Of course, another tool here is making sure we search smart. Someone recently told me how she color codes folders in her email, and I just thought that was brilliant for certain types of tasks or for certain people kinds of tasks. So that's something I'm going to be trying, because unfortunately I waste a lot of time with that searching. So I thought that color coding was kind of brilliant. It could actually allow you to find some things pretty quickly. Some other email productivity hacks that I really like here. Number one, I really like, again, the color coding. So we see that here as another suggestion. So I really like that. I also like that waiting for. I talked a little earlier about delegating. Let's have a folder where we put things where we're waiting on someone to get back to us, so we can take a look at that and, you know, check what the status is in there. I like the one about delaying all outgoing emails, so we can take a look at the outgoing email and make sure that we haven't made a mistake, and that there might not be something we might not want to edit before we send it. Have some resources in here with some different books and different citations and different links to things like the Eisenhower Matrix or the 5 choices. And I also have some other resources in here with some of those books that I recommended that you may want to check out, and the time log that I mentioned from Laura Vanderkam, and some other lists of books and resources that might be helpful to you all as you're thinking about time. Also, we have regional liaisons in our office. So I'm guessing for many of you, that's probably Joe Braden down in your neck of the woods. But if you have questions or need help from our office, you can reach out to these individuals or also to me. And with that, before we get to our last joke, does anybody have any questions? And I have to check out the chat because I think maybe we might have a couple. Okay, so we have a couple of Reese fans in here, and Carmelo, Chris. Excellent. Okay. Anybody have any questions?
Well, you know, one thing as I was listening, Dorinda, is, you know, obviously, you know, you shared a lot of different tools, and there's been so much emphasis on this over the years from different, you know, professionals, experts. Um, do you have any ideas on how to kind of filter which approach works better on different personality types? Because, you know, some tools, you know, that I've tried in the past, I'm like, this is too much work. It's like added work to the process, right? So any thoughts on that? Like, so it actually, it's something that people will actually do.
So that's a great question. Honestly, I think, Chris, the best way is just to try to experiment. So I don't really have a one size fits all. I think it's thinking about your personality, looking at what was presented here and saying, yeah, I could get behind that. The Pomodoro or the flow time, you know, might work for me, because I think it's trying something. I'm a person who is a dinosaur and still uses paper, for example. And I know a lot of people, you know, use digital, but I have a paper calendar, and that's kind of, you know, my master. So I think you're right. It's very different for every individual person. And that's where I like to encourage people to try out some of the different things that we have here, and also to prioritize where is your biggest problem? What do you need the most help with? And then think about a technique that you feel might give you the most help with the biggest problem that you're having. So, example, if email is one of your biggest problems, let's really prioritize and focus on email as a technique, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it really was great. And I don't know, this kind of is similar to what Chris just asked, but going over all those different processes that you can use. Is there one in particular, Dorinda, that speaks to you that you use?
Great question, Wendy. Thank you. So, yes, Pomodoro, I love, especially if I am procrastinating on something. I can
Mhm.
sit and I can try that for 25 minutes and it gets me some motivation. The other one that I like are those questions, especially, what can I start today that's going to prevent an emergency tomorrow? And what's that really big thing that I have to get done today? So, really focusing on whatever that big thing is and how do I make some progress on that, even if it's smaller than I like. So I like to think about Pomodoro if I am procrastinating on something, or even if I just need to get some momentum on something where I'm a little stalled. And then I also like to think about what is going to be my big win of the day and how do I make some progress on that, even if it's smaller than I might like. How do I break that down? And how do I use those questions back on that one slide where it talked about the emergency and kind of the 5 questions? I'll come back to that here real quickly.
Okay.
I love that because I like to ask myself those questions and right there and really think about especially that number one, what's that? Oh, I did that. What's that one thing? Then getting down to what could I start to avoid that emergency? Where might I lose time today? How do I batch different kinds of tasks together? So those are probably my favorite too.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to work on number two.
Yeah.
What is something
Well,
I need to do but don't want to do?
exactly. Well, and that's where, Wendy, honestly, I feel like the Pomodoro helps, or asking
Yeah.
yourself, what is a small micro start that I could get on this thing? Even if it's something I don't want to do, what could I maybe do in 5 minutes just to try to get yourself some momentum? Because
Mhm.
it's really hard when you feel like you have all these things coming at you. And how do I even get started?
Yeah, that's truly the case because as you can imagine, and I'm sure you are too, we're pulled in so many different directions. And even if you have a plan for the day, it's really a challenge to stick to it. At least I find that. And
Yes, it
you're
is.
trying to work on something, but distractions happen. And I am not the best at, I guess, trying to limit those distractions. That's
I
always a
completely
challenge for
agree.
me is how do I limit those distractions so I can try to take a bite out of that one big task that I really don't want to do, but I need to do, so it doesn't turn into an emergency or something that's really going to increase the stress and everything else. That's a huge challenge for me is just being able to limit those distractions to be able to get to what I need to.
Completely agree. Well, and I think your challenge is, Wendy, you're in a member serving organization, you and Chris
Right.
both. So when you're having to serve members, that's a little bit of a different mindset than maybe some other people because sometimes you may have to drop something because
Mhm.
they have something urgent that they need help with.
Yeah, correct. So that's hard. And then getting back to that task.
Completely agree.
Yeah, but I love those questions, the 5 daily productivity questions. Those are really good. I really
Good.
do like that a lot. And I even jotted down something else, and I know Chris talks to me about this one a little bit too, is I liked the 1-3-5 rule. That was good to kind of prioritize with that. Which is
Yeah.
similar, works perfectly with your 5 daily questions. So
Exactly. And
yeah.
Wendy, I'm going to make myself a note right now here because again, if I don't write it down, it's gone. And I'm going to send you these slides so that way you'll have them. And for you and anyone that might want them, you and Chris might want them. Rachel might want them.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who else, but I will make sure I send these over to you because that might be helpful. And if we do this in person, I will tell you, Wendy and Chris, ever, we're going to have a little challenge with that little keyboard activity. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but people really like that. And it causes people to really think about time differently.
Nice. I love that.
Rachel, you
Yeah, I
came off
dropped a
mute
couple other
for,
books that have been impactful to me too, Dorinda, in the chat.
yes, I took a screenshot. Thank you for that, Chris.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Essentialism I probably read 3 times because it's so powerful.
Mhm.
And a lot of what you mentioned something similar, and it triggered my brain on this was Greg McEwen says, what's one decision I can make today that impacts 1,000 other decisions?
Mhm,
So it's like a lot of times it's, that big domino, so to speak, that can take care of other dominoes. Um,
mhm.
and even the procrastinate on purpose, one of the things that he talks about, he kind of takes that Eisenhower matrix and he says, not only is it what Covey and the Eisenhower matrix is, it's like, but one key question is how long will this matter is a key question. So
Mhm.
a lot of times we get so wrapped up in getting things done, but it's like, well, if I really put my time and effort onto that, how long will that matter for that to have been done or whatever? So I thought that was good too. But I think this is definitely a challenge of our day, in every industry, no matter what jobs or situations in life we have. And we were supposed to have more free time because of technology, and instead we have less.
Couldn't agree more. Rachel, did you have a question? You came off mute. I apologize. I didn't mean to ignore you.
Oh, you're fine. I was just waiting for a good time to jump in.
Sure.
I was gonna say the email, like saving your time for email and just doing it in different increments throughout the day. That was something that someone I used to work with told me like 5 years ago, and it totally changed how I managed my time, and it helped me so much because I was constantly like I would have my email up on one screen and then what I was working on the other, so I was constantly getting distracted and popping over to my emails, and just implementing that one thing I think was huge. So I just wanted to say that was a tip that seems simple but makes a really big difference.
Excellent. Thank you, Rachel. We appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. So we're all going to try to maybe do better on that, batching up our emails.
Mhm.
Anyone else have any questions before I get to our last joke? And Wendy, I will send you these slides. And then if you and I
Okay.
want to work together on, another webinar or something like that, I will send you the other flyers that I have because I do have a couple of others and I have another one developed even since you and I last connected.
Oh, great. We would love it. Absolutely.
So I'll get it to you. All right. Well, let's get to our last joke and give you a couple of minutes back. Why did the office clock get promoted? Because it was always on time.
These are like dad jokes. These are like Chris's favorite.
I
These are
know, but
great.
people tell me, Wendy, that I should improve my jokes. But the problem is, if my little nephew can go to school and tell it, then it's probably okay for Aunt Dorinda too. Otherwise, it's probably not appropriate. So we try to keep them, like you said, kind of dad joke-ish. Thank you all so much, Wendy and Chris. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I will send you all the slides. If anyone
Great.
has any questions, please let me know. More than happy to reach out and really appreciate the chance to be with you today. And hope you all have a great day and a very happy Halloween later this week.
Yeah, thank you. And
Thank
just as a
you.
reminder, we'll take this recording, put it on our YouTube channel. So not only will we be able to send out the slides, but if you all want to review the presentation, you can do that there once we get that up and next day or so.
Yeah, it was really great. Thank you again, Dorinda. Our Facebook Live worked fabulous. We had some folks watching there. We've had 41 views on it. So it's a great opportunity, and I'm sure there'll be more coming. So thank you again, Dorinda, and I look forward to working together again in the future.
Look forward to it as well. Thank you so much, Wendy and Chris, for the opportunity. Thank you, Rachel. Thanks all for being here. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, take
Thank
care,
you. You
everybody.
too.
Thanks.